Thank you for joining us this evening. You are now attending the webinar entitled Exploring Women and Girls of African Descent in 20th and 21st Century Speculative Fiction. Our leader for this session is Karima K. Jeffrey-Legette, NHC Fellow 2022, 2023, 2023, 2024, Associate Professor, Department of English and Foreign Languages at Hampton University. I'd also like to acknowledge LaShonda Carter from Riverside City College in Riverside, California, who is a member of our Teacher Advisory Council, who will serve as our TA for tonight's session. LaShonda will be active in the chat, sharing thoughts and resources and asking questions. And again, LaShonda, I appreciate you. I've had the opportunity to work with you on several occasions throughout the years, and just know that we really appreciate your contributions to our work. So thank you for being here tonight. Karima K. Jeffrey-Legette is Associate Professor of English at Hampton University with degrees from Swarthmore College, Lehman College, City University, New York, and Howard University. She has served as interim chair of the English and Foreign Languages Department, writing across curriculum coordinator, UNCF Mellon Programs Coordinator, ETS AP Pre-Testing Campus Coordinator, certifying campus advisor for the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship, and was recently nominated to join the ETS College Board's CLEP Composition Development Committee. And I also have to let you all know, this is important, that as an undergrad, Karima majored in English and education, and her first job out of undergrad was as a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English teacher. So kudos to you, Karima, and thank you for sharing that with me. Karima's interested in African diasporic literature and multi-ethnic American studies. She has written and lectured extensively on topics related to cultural, cross-cultural expression. Her particular interest is in the response that scholars, writers have to colonization or oppression. Noted works include speculative film and moving images by or about Black women and girls. Watch it, which examines the paradoxical nature of increasingly popular but oftentimes problematic depictions of African-descended women girls in contemporary cinema, involving the supernatural, science fiction, horror, and or superheroes. Her current project, Black Girls Write the Future, speculative fiction by or about Black women and girls, continues the conversation examining select writers and artists of comics, cartoons, graphic novels, literary fiction authors, singers, songwriters, and directors of popular speculative fiction shows and films. With Black Girls Write, unlike the former text, Watch It, focal consideration is given to women as the content creators. Jeffrey-Legette has received numerous fellowships, honors, and awards, including distinctions from the UNCF Mellon Program, the University of Richmond, Tocqueville, seminars, the New York University Faculty Resource Network, and the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Faculty Development Network. Of note is her current participation in the University of Kansas Interactive Black Book Project, which is providing her with tools for developing her website. To our audience of teachers, both national and international, and without further ado, I present to you our leader for this session, Dr. Karima Jeffrey-Legette. Karima, we are looking forward to your talk. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully you all can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I am thrilled to be here. Now, Mike, I know you probably explained this to me, but am I advancing the slides or are you?
Yes, you are. You
okay.
are. Good deal.
I tell you, fantastic. Well, truly it is my honor and my joy to be with you all. I love seeing all of the Los Angeles USD folks in the chat. And so I also say good evening to you all on the west side across the land off the Pacific Ocean. But I also say hello to all of y'all in between, since I'm on the East Coast. Mike and I are on the East Coast off the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to jump right in. I have a lot of ground that I would like to cover with you all tonight, but I promise you, please be active in the chat. There are some questions that I will pose along the way, but I also am thrilled to hear and see and try to respond to particular inquiries that you all have. For instance, someone shared about being an art instructor and having and wanting to introduce some artists. I don't have. It's a short sightedness on my part since I don't have any particular slides on that. Although there's lots of content, and there are some artists that I will get to who are contributing to the comic, cartoon, graphic novel culture. But I wanted to lift up Wangechi Mutu and Carrie Mae Weems. Those are two artists, Afrofuturist artists that have beautiful work in lots of different media that would be great for a range of classes. All right, so I greet you all from Hampton, Virginia, and it is my joy to share my passion, my love, my enthusiasm for what women are doing and how we are seeing women in Black speculative fiction. So just to give you a general overview of how things will flow tonight, which was set so well by the music, I hope you all were dancing. I was too. Um, we are going to first and foremost look at a series of slides that I've pulled together from a bunch of different presentations that I've done over the years. So when the background changes a little bit, that's intentional. I kind of want you to know that I am pulling material. It's kind of like a collage from different things that I've done on this topic. And the way in which I'm pulling them together are hoping to anchor you first in some highlights from my book. So thank you, Mike, for talking about Watch It. That came out in January of 2023. It was written most for an upper level high school, student doing research in an upper level high school class. That book should be accessible, and certainly for a college student. But again, for practitioners, for you all, my educators, there are resources in there that can be beneficial for structuring curriculum. And so I'm going to dive through, touch upon some key points that I tried to get at in that book, and then I'm going to go into some actors, some authors that again are either prominent in visual text that you could integrate, something you could show from a video series, a streaming series, a TV show, something you could show from, if you show movies to your classes, some films that you might want to think about or consider to integrate into your pedagogy. And then I'm going to conclude the talk with some tentative topics. These are the kinds of things that I've written on, published on in the time that I was on my fellowship at the center, or these are things that I'm thinking about as I'm working on the Black Girls Write the Future book, as well as things that my students are right now engaging in, exploring in a course an upper level course that I'm teaching at Hampton, along with my composition course, my spring semester composition course that I'm teaching at Hampton. All right, so we're going to dive in, exploring women and girls of African descent in 20th and or 21st century speculative fiction. So this journey for me began in the summer of 2018 when I received a UNCF Mellon Teaching and Learning grant to do a faculty teaching and learning institute at my home campus, Hampton University. And I co-coordinated that with Valerie Ann Johnson, who is dean down at Shaw University. At the time, she was at Bennett College on the other side of North Carolina. And so in that imperative, the goal and the hope, not unlike tonight, was to bring together educators who are teaching this content to their students, but also to bring together creatives who are writing the content or structuring the content, as well as folks like me, scholars who are interrogating, who are analyzing the material. And so we had a collection of about 20 participants in that event, including 3 presenters. It was a very short symposium. We were together for 2.5 days, and we had a beautiful exchange, an encouraging exchange that really inspired me to move away from what previously had been more traditional English literary analysis, literary criticism, and to feel free to jump into doing and shifting my focus to work in the area of speculative fiction, speculative film. And another reason why I start with the work that began in 2018 is Hoda Zaki was a plenary speaker at that event. She wrote the foreword to the book, and Trudia Harris, another NHC fellow who was there, I think Mike can correct me, but I know I think she was there in 2019, but before that, she was there, I think, in the late 90s. And so Dr. Harris, Trudia Harris, wrote the afterword for my book. And so that collaboration really was birthed out of that time that we all had together at this faculty institute at Hampton in 2018. Now, one of the things that it's important to begin with, and we certainly began with at that collective in 2018, are terminology. So I often get the question, and this was a question that many of my fellows posed when I was at the center last year and again this past fall, which was, well, why, Karima? Why focus or shift your attention to looking at Black femininity, looking at explorations of issues, concerns, identity formation for a Black girl or for a woman of African descent, specifically in this SF, the speculative fiction content. And so I like to take folks back to Robert Heinlein's 1948 essay on the writing of speculative fiction, whereby he coined this idea of speculative fiction, and under its umbrella, he housed a series of other forms of writing, forms of types of fiction that honestly is flourishing so vibrantly now, not just in terms of the literature, but also in terms of our popular culture content, right? Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. The writers that are structuring and contributing to the comics that are coming out of Marvel and DC right now with Black female protagonists at the center. And so the work that N.K. Jemisin is doing on fantasy text and fantasy topics. So to me, it's interesting that in 1948, when Heinlein gave us this idea of speculative fiction, he gives us science fiction, fantasy, horror. He talks about alternative history, apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, dystopian, utopian fiction. And these, again, are areas that are blossoming right now, particularly as it pertains to this content that I am so fascinated and intrigued by. Another reason why I gravitate so strongly, it appeals to me, speculative fiction, is the way in which at the crux of the content, you're thinking of future possibilities, you are investing in counter narratives, and you are empowering alternative possibilities. So out of this construct that Heinlein gave us in 1948 in the subcategories that are housed under this larger umbrella of speculative fiction, we now have, coming out of the 70s with it wasn't necessarily known as Afrofuturism in the 70s when Sun Ra and George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic were composing those texts, were writing their music. But certainly now, starting in the 1990s and on today, we fully understand the traction that Afrofuturism is having as an influence, as an igniter of a lot of this content. And so you have here on the slide, as you all see, I'm not one to read directly from them. I know that you all can read the slides as I'm kind of lecturing or talking to you all, and that's intentional. But I do, absolutely want you to know that there's space and room for questions in the chat if you all have any of them. And so out of the construction of Afrofuturism as a very popular method, a very popular theory around the construction of Black speculative fiction, we also now have in the 2000s terms like Afro-pessimism, terms like Afro-surrealism, the Black Gothic, Afro-fabulations, the Black Utopia, African fabulations, African futurisms, and many, many, many more. Now, my interest tonight is not necessarily to dwell on any of these particular terms, but to offer for you all as educators a mechanism by which you can ground a particular lesson plan or a particular unit, right? Meaning that any of these particular terms, any of these particular methods or schools of thought, or something that you could either have your students define and explore further in a project or an assignment, or certainly there's something that can guide the kind of lesson plan you might do, for instance, if you're an elementary school teacher, right? Where you could have in your mind a unit that's informed by Afrofuturism without really defining the term for your kids, right? Whether it's a drawing assignment or whether it's a piece of music that you have them listen to, or whether it's a children's book that you find that may be exploring some of this content, okay? So that's one thing that I wanted to kind of drop into your toolkit and sort of plant the seed for you all to think about. And as I'm going to stop there for a minute because I do want to get a little bit of interaction. I wonder if any of you are familiar with these concepts and are experimenting with them in the classroom. And if you are, I'd love for you to drop in the chat which one of those you might be acquainted with and be experimenting with. And if not, I wonder if now, as part of this collective community, based on the definitions that I've provided here, if any of you have thoughts about the kinds of topic, person, or text that you could potentially experiment with in a lesson plan or unit. So I'd love to see any thoughts, reactions in the chat. Yep, I'm seeing LaShonda talking about Afro-Surrealists and her exploration of Opal Moore, Henry Dumas, and Rochelle Spencer. Are any of you all doing anything with Afrofuturism? Do you do anything with, say, Black Panther that a lot of folks might find accessible?
Yes, all great questions. All great questions. So thanks to Katie. Yeah.
So it may be slow. I have a super slow internet on my end, so it could be on mine. But do please feel free, being comfortable in the chat. And if you have ideas of things that you can do, I hope that you will. And again, I don't know if there are any elementary school teachers here on the in the audience tonight, but I really am thinking, because as a college professor, I know that my age group is so very different, and there are sorts of presumptions in terms of what I ask them to do or how I ask them to do it. But I really, really am thinking from a mindset of how would this translate for a third grade classroom? You know, what is something that you could do with kindergartners? What's something you could do with fifth graders? And so if you have things that are coming to mind, you know, I would love to see here, and hopefully you also can dialogue with your colleagues about different things that you can play around with. So I see it now. Yes, you all jumping in. I love it. I love it. I love it. So to me, a way in which you could experiment with these would be through, you know, any kind of creative, a drawing assignment, perhaps bringing in a visual that the kids could color in, right? Or again, if you do anything around costuming or dress up day, if they can dress up as a superhero, right? That could essentially, especially if it's a Black superhero like Black Panther or Shuri or Moon Girl, or Ironheart, that you could also think about it being falling within this construct of Afrofuturism. So this is all fantastic. I love it. I'm trying to make sure that even though we don't have the visuals to see each other's faces, that I can be engaged and connecting with you all. So thank you for the feedback in the chat. All right, so I want to move on to one of the challenges that comes from Heinlein's work, and some of you all may experience this in your district, or may experience this from your administration. I certainly did early on in my career before I was tenured, where there was pushback on the prospects and possibilities of this kind of content being rigorous enough for academic study. So one of the things that I also wanted to encourage you to think about tonight are the ways in which there are as it pertains specifically to the canon of African American literature, the way that there are writers who traditionally have not been talked about as in any way doing work that can be attributed to speculative fiction. But for sure, they are. Again, if we go back to Heinlein's terms of counter narratives, or we think about alternative histories, or we think about the ways in which it is revisionist, that you are dealing with writers who are, or as Heinlein does not necessarily define, but they may be dealing with different spiritual, faith-based, different spiritualities, or they may be dealing with a faith-based subset or aspect of the character development or narrative, or they may be dealing with ghosts or hauntings, or when we think about the work of Charles Chestnut and his idea of conjuring, right? That these are writers that we can explore within the context of speculative fiction. So some of you, I wonder, may or may not be teaching these folks, people like W.E.B. Du Bois, or people like Colson Whitehead, or people like August Wilson, or Zora Neale Hurston, or Toni Morrison, or Alice Walker, or Gloria Naylor, or Edwidge Danticat. And if you are, then I would suggest to you that another way that you could build out your curriculum, another way that you can introduce these ideas around Black speculative fiction, is to not just teach those writers within the traditional canonical sense, but to also then introduce and talk about the ways in which they're a part of this field of speculative fiction. And so I do wonder, and I'll pose another general question for feedback in the chat, if any of you all are already doing that, or if any of you all have any particular thoughts about that, because I'm a traditionally trained scholar, right? And did my master's thesis on Zora Neale Hurston, and of course have always talked about her, with her work on hoodoo and her interest in the performative, but never would have put her in the same category necessarily as an Octavia Butler. And they're not identical, but they can be in conversation with each other. Okay. Yes, corregidors are fantastic. LaShonda, I have the right TA tonight. Thank you so much, ma'am. And so again, beautiful feedback, excellent reactions and thoughts. Thank you so very much. So now I want to take a quick segue. Don't hit play yet, Mike. But I want to. I've pulled in a short 2-minute clip where Janelle Monáe is talking about the influence that Afrofuturism has had on her life, on her body of work, and the ways in which she sees herself participating in a worldview, right? Participating in as part of a global society, right? A community collective. And so as educators, I think that our job really is about preparing, right, folks for their vocation for the future. And and what are some of the things that we can do in addition to the competencies, in addition to the standards, right? In addition to the particular test performance evaluative measures that are part of our profession that we may like or not like, right? But it's an inescapable reality that we all face. But how can we meet those instruments, meet those needs, while at the same time being sensitive to these young people that we're putting on a journey, right? A life journey, we hope to be gainful, contributing citizens to the human project, yeah? And so I want to take a few minutes to listen to this little clip that Janelle Monáe shares, because it links back to using any of those constructs, those concepts, Afrofuturism, Afro-surrealism, the Black utopia, yada, 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 if that appeals to you, but then also about introducing the kind of content that inspires our young people, kind of content that ignites them, right, to want to come to our classes, right, to want to listen and talk with us. So, Mike, if you want to hit play on that, and then I'll jump back in. All right, excellent. I hope that you all enjoyed that. Again, I love the way she talks about her experience as a student at Spelman and the way in which that was transformative for her, right? And so that always, as I listen to that video and as I talk with my students and I walk, the campus, I'll walk the hallways between my office and classrooms, I'm always thinking about, how am I meeting the needs, right? Am I meeting the needs of this younger generation, not just in terms of my content, but in terms of equipping them, right? Tapping into that God given call that's on their lives, right? To do something wonderful, to do something unique, to do something that only they themselves can do. So one of the things that I want to skim through fairly quickly are some highlights from the book, and so I'm so grateful that Mike has shared and talked about the book that really is the genesis of the work that started at that 2018 Teaching and Learning Institute. And so I'm going to go through each of the little chapters. I'm not going to hit on every single bullet point, but I do that because I want to offer some historical context, right, for the ways in which Black speculative fiction has evolved, not just as discursively, but also in this context, in this particular book, the way in which I think it has informed or can be used to inform, the evolution of filmmaking, the types of films that have women at the forefront. And so, again, I'm going to just zip through. If you have questions, comments, please do drop them in the chat. I know Mike is monitoring that, and there is time for Q&A at the end for me to either clarify anything or certainly to get feedback and thoughts. So again, Dr. Zaki, I've shared with you all, Hoda was a plenary speaker for that 2018 institute that I coordinated at Hampton University, and she's written the foreword. And what I really appreciate about her opening of the book, her framing of the book, is the ways in which she pushes back, right, on this question, this time at which speculative fiction was not deemed kind of worthy enough for content. And I know that has changed. I hope that it has changed. My sense is it may not have changed in every institution. And so, again, some of the resources that you all have in the bibliography that will be distributed or shared with you all are to offer you the opportunity it means to push back on any of that rhetoric that might say, oh, well, that's not scholarly enough. No, there's really quite a bit of scholarly, academic, rigorously critiqued and vetted material out here on this content. The other thing that I really appreciated from her forward is what I strive to do in my own work with these texts is to really unearth the hidden meanings and to try to make them applicable to others, right? And I think that is what most of us do in our own classrooms. We're asking our students to think, we're asking them to think critically, we're asking them to find meaning and to be able to express and articulate it. And I really do believe that Black speculative fiction is a phenomenal arena for delving into this kind of work. And of course, it's not to suggest that it's the only means. I mean, I think that there are other ways, obviously, that one can do it. In my introduction, I continued some discussion of this historical understanding of Black science fiction versus Black speculative fiction, which to me, I don't put a lot of weight in because, again, if we go back to Heinlein's term, science fiction really is housed under the umbrella of speculative fiction. But I also call attention in the introduction for those of you that are interested in Black filmmaking. I'll also hone in on these key film critics. Donald Bogle, a phenomenal historian on Black filmmaking. I think I saw in the chat earlier someone mentioning him. Robert Means Coleman has a brilliant work on horror noir that was adapted or influenced the making of a documentary on Shudder the streaming system Shudder of the same name, horror noir that Jordan Peele is an executive producer on. Then you have Ed Guerrero, who's up at NYU. He's got a new book that just came out this 2022, 2023, I believe. And then, of course, the phenomenal, timeless feminist critic Bell Hooks, whose work, also a lot of her work, looks at media studies and has commentary about media studies that even if she was writing in the 90s is still incredibly, I think, useful for us today. So again, those depending upon where you're at in your own reading, the work that you put into the construction of your curriculum, and or the age group of your particular student population. These may be things that you can use. These may be things that you can share with your young people. Certainly, an invaluable, super accessible 2-volume compilation is Cherie Thomas's Dark Matter. If these 2 books are not in your library, I would encourage you to ask your librarians to purchase it. What is wonderful about Thomas's compilation is she gives us essays by people like Samuel R. Delaney, Walter Mosley, Octavia Butler, India Corfor, whereby they are talking about this school, this field of people of African descent contributing, shaping, writing content that is pushing the boundaries of future possibilities. But she also includes in the compilation primary text. So as a teacher new to this content or looking for material that can meet your students right where they're at, there are resources that she has pulled together in these 2 books of the same name, but they have different different subheadings, right? And so I would encourage you. This is why I put those on the slide and want to highlight them. In chapter 1, I talk about stereotypes, and I'm not going to again dwell in all of these particular points that are coming from my English 404 class that I'm currently teaching right now when I'm lecturing on these issues with them. But, Adelifu Nama has a book. I think it's his black superhero book, where he essentially says, it's really kind of futile to focus on stereotypes. It's a kind of cyclical loop. It's ever present. We can't, it's inescapable. And so I'd rather not really dwell and focus on the stereotypes per se, but highlight some other elements, some other attributes to examine, some other tropes or themes to look at. And I think that by all means, which is why I mentioned him, that's a reasonable pushback. It's a perfectly valuable counter argument. But what I have found with my students at Hampton is even though they know the stereotypes, right, they're familiar to them. You ask them what a mammy is or auntie is or Uncle Tom is, which I find a super offensive, problematic term because, Uncle Tom is a rather powerful, endearing, heroic character, albeit that the stereotype has evolved from that storyline, right? But nonetheless, I show them Marlon Riggs's Ethnic Notions, and this is my English 102 second semester composition course. We just did it about a month ago. And they always light up because they get a historical grounding that they otherwise had not had. So I think that there is again the possibility, depending upon again your grade level, certainly 7th, 8th grade and higher, that this can be potentially appropriate to explore with them because they're seeing it in their social media platforms, and they're seeing it in the popular. Their gaming, the music videos, and so forth. They're seeing these images surface, so they'll identify it and they'll have more ideas and more information about the history of the image, but also ways, hopefully, to nullify the image. So I talk a little bit about stereotypes in the context of the Mammy, the Jezebel, the Hagar, in the context of these four films in chapter one. In chapter two, I highlight on Halle Berry's corpus, and there are folks who say, well, why Halle Berry and not Angela Bassett? And again, I think it's an absolutely reasonable critique of the text. But what I find so intriguing about Berry, as you can see perhaps from the films that I pulled onto this slide, is first and foremost, she still remains the only woman of African descent to have an Academy Award, the Oscar, for a lady in a leading role. And so we can ask ourselves, what is that about? Now, she got that, I think, in early 2004, I think is when she received the Oscar for Monsters Ball. Yeah, Monsters Ball. Now, since her, and she was the second woman of African descent to garner an Oscar, following Hattie McDaniel's winning of the Oscar for supporting role in Gone with the Wind in the 1940s. So we have to ask, so 60 years between one woman of African descent getting it, about 60 years for the second one to get it. And then here we are 20 years later, and another woman has not, a woman of African descent has not gotten it, right? These are sort of problematic questions that for someone like me that is interested in popular culture, that's interested in the media representations that are fueling our psyche, right? That our young people are being fed by this and this content. And there are ways that we can help them ask questions. We can help them draw their own conclusions, right? Help them, from my vantage point, be the wave of change, right? That is continuing to drive the marker forward, drive these images forward, challenge the industry to be better, challenge the world, right, to be better. In terms of Berry as well, something that intrigues me about her, and I talk about a little bit in the chapter, is how her own filmography evolves, it seems, into this area of Black speculative fiction. So again, if you look at her most recent work, John Wick 3, Moonfall, Extant, right? Arguably her playing Storm in the X-Men franchise, or her doing Catwoman, God bless her. I just watched that with my students last week, right? That her work has moved, I think, more into this field, into this area, and I wonder, right, if part of that is due to her effort, her conscious desire to be presented in ways that again are not simply restricted to her sexuality, or not simply contingent upon her appearance, right? But that's really allowing her to tap into characters, tap into the presenting of Black womanhood, or how we can perceive Black womanhood in progressive ways. And so these are some of the things that I try to do in that chapter on her. Chapter 3 is my favorite chapter, because it is a huge nod to Black love. I don't know if any of you all have watched these series, Altered Carbon, HBO Watchmen series, or Lovecraft Country, but again, our young people are watching this stuff, and herein we find representations of Black women in leading roles where they are the shero. They are bad girls. They are insurmountable, and they are adored. They are loved. They are supported by equally strong Black men, and we don't get a lot of content of that nature. And so I think it's exciting to lift up love, right? Love is the key, to make the world better. But also to see the ways in which these partners are willing to to stand and help their women, shore their women up, right? Help these characters, help these leaders, help these fighters, help these deliverers, because that's what these women are in these texts. They are the means for saving humanity, literally, in these constructed texts, right? And so that's exciting for me to see. And I think it's an image that we are getting in this Black speculative fiction around women and girls that is ever the more pervasive, ever the more present, ever the more potentially troubling, depending upon the film, the series, but certainly worth interrogation and a lot of utility for something we can show in a middle school, high school classroom, or for the attributes that we see in these characters that we can potentially explore in a younger learner. Okay. Chapter 4, I move into the discussion on girls and this redundant image of a telekinetic girl, powerful telekinetic girl, or a powerful girl, a powerful telepath. And we have Meg in A Wrinkle in Time. We have Ruby in Darkest Minds. We have Lila, the daughter, in The Family of Women, Bo being her grandmother, Ruth being her mother, in Fast Color. Those three movies, Wrinkle in Time, Darkest Minds, Fast Color, all came out in 2018. And again, you see, I tried to capture these visuals of how these girls are dismantling matter, right? How they're reshaping and dismantling matter as we know it. You know, what is that about, right? On the one hand, for again a younger, here are texts that one could show to a young, like A Wrinkle in Time, right? That's a PG movie, right? What does that do for that girl when she sees a girl that looks like her on the screen? What does that do for that young child who feels marginalized, who feels misunderstood, who feels bullied, and they see on the screen a loner, an isolated individual who is the most powerful being, right? And their tool is their mind. Like, is there a better metaphor for us, my colleagues, right? That you have this image of someone who has to master her mind, and that mastery is what humanity needs to thrive. I love it. I love it. I wish there was audio because I hope you all are smiling and grinning and nodding with me. Right. So in this chapter, I point to, this adage that we've come quite familiar with, Black Girl Magic, and here now we have filmic material that actualizes this concept of Black Girl Magic, and we have the image of the underdog who's the most valuable, right? Most important person. Um, I always love when I'm talking about this with my students and I see the kids that are sometimes disengaged, or I see the kids that feel, the young adults that feel that they don't quite fit in, and then I see that they light up, right? They sit up a little bit taller because they go, oh, this is me. Like, I can relate to that person, right? And if that person matters and is important, then I matter. I'm important, right? Okay, so to this trope of the Black girl psionic, one would say, well, those films, Karima, they're a little dated. 2018, Wrinkle in Time, Fast Color, The Darkest Mind. Well, we get the character again in this HBO Max film, Gray Matter. So these are, again, perhaps texts that you might feel or amenable, or things that you could fit into your own teaching strategy. But certainly they may give you some ideas of the kinds of assignments or the kinds of situations that maybe you can use to create. To create an atmosphere, a tone, to create an assignment with your young people. Okay, so I'm going to zoom through the book and then I'll open out again for any thoughts, reactions in the chat. The next chapter is on what I call La Femme Blackula. And so, there is a long tradition around, starting with the 1970s movie Blackula, of the black vampire. But there is also within that genre of this subset of text around the black female vampire. And my colleague of mine, Kendra Parker, did a brilliant work, She Bites Back, that came out in 2018, 2019, that chronicles a lot of this stuff and particularly calls attention to some of these writers like Pearl Cleage, Jewel Gomez, and others. But what fascinated me, and I jumped ahead in the slides, I'll come back, is how you have this filmic content, Blackula, Scream, Ganja and Hess, Vamp, Queen of the Damned, Vampire in Brooklyn, and so forth, and a new movie that's on Netflix, The Invitation in 2022, that again uh, uh, reimagine this image of the black female vampire. But you also have this tradition of literature, right? So I am a traditionally trained literary scholar, and folks are always asking me, right? Well, what are the things I can read? What are the stories that I can focus on or analyze as part of my work? And so I was super interested and intrigued when as part of my grading ritual. I'm normally have something streaming because I'm up late, plugging through those papers. That these movies, came on, and I don't watch a lot of horror, but I went, oh my goodness, there's another girl running around, with these fangs and blood smeared all over her. What is that about? So again, we have the passage that came out in 2018. We had the movie A Girl with All the Gifts, that came out in 2015 in the UK, but around 2018 was now making its way to American screens. And then, of course, many of you have talked about Octavia Butler and teaching Octavia Butler, and we have then her last novel that arguably some say she was probably going to make into a series, that came out in 2005, Fledgling. And what is that? That is the image of the girl vampire, quite akin to the protagonist from from chapter 3, Altered Carbon, Kilcrest Falconer and Altered Carbon, Angela Abor in the HBO Watchmen series, Letty in Lovecraft Country, as well as Meg from A Wrinkle in Time, Lila from Fast Color, and our character from The Darkest Mind. We have the women, these girls, who are yet again the deliverer, the redeemer. Now, Trudia Harris has an essay, Saint Sinners, I'm not getting the whole name right at the moment, where she talks about the supra-human, right? This idea that, black women have to be so strong, right? So powerful. And again, the savior of all. And again, for that counter argument to some of the things I'm talking about, we're seeing a repeat of that element, right, in these characters that I'm presenting to you. But a difference between what Trudia brings to bear in that particular essay is these women find themselves as the most powerful beings or entities in a situation, and yet they still can't save themselves, right? Someone else has to still come and save them, or they're going to be, expired in their effort. They're not going to survive in their efforts in that messianic quest that they might be on. The text that I'm giving you here, these characters that I'm giving you here, that is not the case, right? In each of these individuals that I'm fascinated by, that I'm lifting up here, there is no one else to fit the bill. There's no one else to meet the task. It is these characters, right? And so again, I talked about this coming back from leave with my freshman students at Hampton, who again, the first week of class, they're slumped in their chairs, like, yeah, what are we gonna do? This is, big deal. And I talked to them about, when you have these texts, that are showing characters in hopeless, cataclysmic situations that are out of their control and not of their making, right? And yet, there is something in them that positions them to redeem everybody. Then there's hope. And when I tell you that these young people lightened up, like, oh, wait a minute, you mean there's something that I can possibly have some optimism about? Yes, young people, there are difficult, concerning, real problems that we have in the world, and you guys are the change agents that we need. You are the wave of change that we need. And there's hope because we get it in these characters. We get it in these stories, right? We get it in these settings. And so that gets me to chapter 6, whereby I found that a lot of the actresses in the content, in the who are doing the voiceovers for the cartoon context, for the comic book superheroes, who are physically the women who are doing the fight choreography, or doing some of it with stunt doubles, that many of these actresses, these black women of African, excuse me, these women of African descent, these actors of African descent, many of them have their beginning in horror films. Such was the case with Angela Bassett, for instance, such is the case with Jada Pinkett Smith, for instance, such was the case with CC H. Pounder. So they're beginning in this genre, or as we look at the work of 21st, 20th century texts, and those are some of the movies, popular movies and characters that I talk about in the chapter that are here visualized on the slide. Then you have actors who are moving into that genre. You know, who are, think about the cast of characters in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, right? I think about Viola Davis and her role in The Woman King. And The Woman King is not speculative per se. It is a historical, it's a fictionalization of actual historical events. But arguably, why do that film in the 21st century? Because folks are seeing the Dora Milaje in Black Panther and need a historical cultural context for that. Well, we get it, right, in The Woman King. Okay, I feel like I'm giving you all a lot. I hope you all are enjoying all of this. And so chapter in this chapter about horror, I return to the image of the messianic woman, girl of African descent. But in this case, and I'm on the last bullet point on the slide, I introduce or explore this notion of the Afro pessimist or Black Gothic. And what does that mean? That means that these texts, and there's a big field now that is talking about the imprint that the enslavement of Africans has had on our American society, and the way in which that system, that institution of the enslavement of Africans is continuing to now, has been expressed, the trauma of it has been expressed in the creative text, but now, particularly in this realm of Black speculative fiction, people are actively examining this idea, right? So you think about a Jordan Peele's Get Out. Like, what is that about, right? That is about how can you disenfranchise someone else, literally remove their consciousness so that you can control their body. You know, what is that about? Like, what would compel you to do that? Well, that's almost an allegorical examination of what happened when blacks were when African descended people were seen as less than a full person, and was free labor, right? And so these again are possible topics that you can think about with assignments, with content that you're doing in classrooms, or certainly things that you can have at the back or forefront of your mind as you are working with your various student populations. All right, so I feel like I've talked quite a bit, so I do want to pause and ask if there are any questions, comments, feedback in the chat. I'd love to try to clarify anything, or get any thoughts on what I've shared thus far.
Good deal. Thank you so much. And I would encourage everyone to enter your questions in the managed Q&A. And also, the session will be available on demand. And you have, Karima, I mean, the richness of the resources. I am reading through them. And I'll encourage everyone, please circle back because there's so many resources that are available for you. So I encourage you to do that. We have a question from Joanne that she had earlier. She mentioned, do you consider the stories of the powerful African Orishas to be the origin of speculative fiction? Is there a connection between the folklore of old and more modern speculative fiction?
So this sounds like this could be a question that might have come from a family member. So it's funny if this is my cousin-in-law, we're gonna talk. Or you put me on blast right now with a difficult question, but I think So I personally don't think that it is the origin, but I do absolutely recognize that a lot of writers are coming out of that particular cosmological tradition, and they are, if you are familiar with that system, then you absolutely will recognize the deities that are appearing in the text, or you will certainly understand and appreciate some of the codes, if you will, that can appear. What I will say, for me, in response to this question, particularly circling back to what I was saying about the canon of African American letters, is there is, and this is not to say that Black people are the only folks with a spiritual underpinning, right? That clearly, if you are dealing with spirit, right, you're dealing with the supernatural, you're dealing, right, with the unreal. You're having to tap into or recognize the impossible within the midst of the possible, right? And so I would say to Joanne that I absolutely agree that in this body of Black speculative fiction, spirituality in a variety of forms is important in informing and shaping the text. Another thing about those characters that I've compiled in that chapter 3, Altered Carbon, the HBO Watchmen series, and Lovecraft Country, is a subtext of those series, of that plot structure, delves around this idea of the human and spirit, or the human and a person's spiritual underpinnings, right? Meaning, what do they believe? Are they Christian, and they are believing in Christian ideals? Are they tapping into magic, and they're using other sorts of spiritual knowledge to delve in, to tap into that? Or again, is it another system entirely, that is the anchor or the basis for their sense of spirituality? So I think it's a great question. So I have to miniaturize the chat in order to see what's going on in the chat. I'm sorry, you all, I'm on this tiny little MacBook screen here.
No,
Anything else, Mike, that
it's
you saw?
it's all good. Thank you for that. There was a question that came up earlier about Black speculative fiction, particularly Afrofuturism, and you mentioned how it places us in the future. From a socio-political and/or pedagogical perspective, why is that important to students? This idea of seeing Black people in the future. And you mentioned being a part of the wave of change. You refer to the sense of hope. In the chat, LaShonda mentioned liberationist epistemologies as well. And I know, obviously, during the 60s, it was so important when we talk about the rise of Afrofuturistic thought. So, but this idea of being placed in the future, what's the significance of that for students?
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And so I have a blog on in memoriam to Nichelle Nichols, and I'm going to read a quote that she has, that you can find on the Star Trek the StarTrek.com website, because
Yeah.
to me that's the best answer to this question, right? Many of you all may know or not know that Nichelle Nichols, the starring role of Nyota Uhura in the original Star Trek series, she was ready to resign. She had actually given her resignation letter to Gene Roddenberry within, I think, the first year and a half or so of the series, because she very much felt like, hey, I am a classically trained theater artist, an actress, and a musician in my own right. And here you all have me showing up on the set, just sitting around. I don't have any dialogue. I don't have any character development. I don't have any scenes that really are presenting Uhura as a relevant part of this crew, right? And she gives a letter to Gene Roddenberry, and he's like Nichelle, you've got to see the vision. You don't quite see the vision of what I'm trying to do here. Please, 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 please. I don't want to take your letter. Take the weekend to think it over. Come back and talk to me on Monday, early next week. I'm not going to take your resignation today. But if after the weekend you think about it, you come back and you still are sticking to your guns, then I'll have to let you out of your contract. So that weekend, I think this was like a Thursday or something that she met with him. That weekend, there's an NAACP event that she attends. I don't remember if she was an honored guest or what, but she was there, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was there as well. And as the event is kind of winding down and people are doing the mixing and mingling, someone comes over and says, "Hey, are you available to meet your number one fan?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'm here. I'm not going to be in the show much longer. I don't mind doing a little publicity. Who is it? I'll do it." And so as they're walking her over, right, she sees it. They're taking her over to King's entourage, right? She can certainly see that. And so I want to read here what she says he said to her. At the NAACP event, Nichols met King, her biggest fan, and it was in this moment Roddenberry's exasperation resounded with her. King expressed, quote, "Don't you see what this man is doing? This is the future. He has established us as we should be seen. When we see you, we see ourselves, and we see ourselves as intelligent and beautiful and proud. 300 years from now, we are here. So we keep marching, and this is the first step. You turn on your television, and the news comes on, and you see us marching and peaceful. You see the peaceful civil disobedience, and you see the dogs, and you see the fire hoses. And we all know because Uhura's on the screen on that ship, you know, in the future. We all know they cannot destroy us because we are there in the 23rd century." So, end quote. So, I would suggest to you all, in the immortal words of Dr. King through Nichelle Nichols, that this is why it matters to our students. Because again, we are in the midst of incredibly trying times. And so if you have kids who are saying, well, there's climate change, the earth is not going to be here anyway, why should I care? Right? When you have texts like these, then you can say, well, wait a minute, I can't see the future, right? These characters, these storylines are presenting some cataclysmic scenarios. These characters, these situations, these settings are presenting some real challenges for humanity. But guess what? We make it. So why should I, Dr. Jeffrey-Legette, you put your name in there, put the name of the young person in there? Why should you doubt that you'll be there or your descendants will be there? So hopefully that is a good answer to that. And so I want to jump back in because there's a bit more content, and I know that that I'm supposed to be ending. So I'm gonna zoom. I promise, Mike.
It's
I'm gonna zoom.
all good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that answer. In the words of Antoinette, she mentioned that he saw us through her. So very powerful. So thank you so much. Keep on going.
Okay, fantastic. So at the end of the my book, Trudia Harris, as I said to you, she was a participant in that 2018 event. She brought students who were writing dissertations at the time, who are now teaching, assistant professors doing their thing. I'm sorry, I'll just jump ahead to hers. Um, she gets into this discussion of codes of containment. And again, these are the questions. So I've already given a kind of answer there. This is something that I hope these questions you all can perhaps generate some thoughts in the chat of any movies or games or TV shows that you're aware of that you either are teaching. So not necessarily the literature. Some of you all have put authors in the chat of writers that you know or think about. But here, excuse me, I wonder if there is popular cultural media content that you are interested in or utilize or even thinking about utilizing. And again, if you don't mind kind of putting that in the chat, and I hope that the chat is a place where you all are talking with each other and sharing with each other some best practices, some possibilities. And again, why? Not unlike what Janelle Monet shared in her video clip about the influence of Afrofuturism on her work, but but uh, but we are working with this younger population, right? Who are going on to do lots of things. Some of whom will be creative. I'm a liberal arts if I could bleed liberal arts and humanities, I would, right? That is absolutely the fabric and fiber of who I am. So I want to encourage that creativity for a younger generation, but there are others who are going in the other fields that I think this content can inspire them. All right. So quickly, these are some things that I'm doing currently in my English 404 course. And you'll see on that poster that there are texts there. So Nilo Hopkinson is there, Octavia Butler's text is there. I have a India Core for Binti there. But then you also see some of the popular media content. The Man Who Fell to Earth, Storm from the X-Men series, Catwoman, Michael Burnham from the Star Trek Discovery series. Naomi from the Ava DuVernay uh, CW show, which I don't know if it's been renewed, but that also comes from a DC comic book as potential content that you can do in a classroom. Here again are some visual text, some shorter things, and our stories. I remember when I was teaching sixth, seventh, and it was sixth, seventh, and 10th grade. So I was split between the upper and middle school when I started my teaching career. We did a Cinderella unit, right? And so as they were commemorating the release of Brandy starring in that role with Whitney Houston, her did some of the songs. And I don't know if any of you all saw that when it was live, but you can find some of the YouTube footage that, again, might be applicable, again, to younger age groups or things that you can play or experiment or share with your young people. What I have here quickly that I want you all to look at as these are prominent actresses of African descent who are doing work or have done a great deal of work in speculative fiction. And in comparison, I want you to see this number of 10 women, mostly all of whom are still producing content now in the 21st century in this area, as opposed to this list of men, which is almost double the list of women. But the majority of the men of African descent who were intentionally contributing to being a part of speculative fiction content, the bulk of them are in texts from the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, right? And that is interesting to me in that I look at this work as a zeitgeist moment, right? That this proliferation of women of African descent, girls of African descent being prominently depicted is indicative of this 21st century moment in which we are living, right? So you have 10 women who are all still principally contributing content, all except for Nichelle Nichols. May she, I'm sure she is resting in peace, right? As opposed to 20 men of African descent, the only a minority of whom Samuel L. Jackson, John Boyega, Will Smith, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, and Michael B. Jordan that are doing work specifically in this area of speculative fiction. Now let's look at the girls. We have here now 6 girls to 4 boys, 6 young women to 4 young men who are popularly contributing content. And what I think is interesting here is someone like a Zendaya or a Storm Reed who are starting their career with a lot of this work and are continuing their career with a lot of this work. Okay, as opposed to the 4 men, many of whom you may I would wager all of you, most of you know the girls' names: Storm Reed, Chloe Bailey, Haley Bailey, Zendaya. How many of you know those males: Miles Chewett, Josiah Young, Caleb McLaughlin, Skyland Brooks? So what I'm suggesting to you all is not only the vibrancy of what we have in our literature, the writers, as some of you all know, but we also have people like Tanana Reeve Dew, Nilo Hopkinson, India Corfor, N.K. Jemisin, Tomi Adeyemi, who are writing prolifically content in this area. And look at, again, the disparity, if you will, to the men who are actively writing this content. Now, by no means am I suggesting that we do not have authors who are doing a lot of work. We do. But what I'm suggesting to you is the zeitgeist moment that we're in with with the contributions of women of African descent. Okay. Now, similarly, here's a list of superheroes, many of whom now are being reintroduced in comic books, right? Particularly Black Panther, Green Lantern, Black Lightning, right? These are Black male action superheroes that are still in great traction, right? Those stories are still going. You look at the list of Black female superheroes, and the list is far shorter in comparison to Black male superheroes. But again, take a look here at the last 10 years or so, the number of Black female superheroes that are very popular now. Valkyrie in the Thor movies. Um, um, a Black Spider Woman in the second Miles Morales film. Um, Naomi, the CW show, the women Ironheart, Shuri, Queen Ramonda in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Okay? Um, I'll zoom. Now, here is the arts for the folks who are interested in the artistic, creative elements. These are the women behind the scenes who are drawing, who are coloring, who are illustrating our cartoon, comic book, um, um, graphic novel content, and they are the writers. So we have to lift up Jackie Orms, who was again writing in the 1930s. That's this timeline here that I've given you, that was syndicated in the Black press with her Torchy Brown serial. We then have in the 1990s Barbara Brandon Croft with her Where I'm Coming From, nationally, internationally syndicated comic strip that was it circulated predominantly through the white press, right? Her book was just a compilation of Where I'm Coming From, was just released in 2023. And then as you can see here, we've got Eve Ewing out of University of Chicago. She's writing the current Black Panther comic book. She has written the Shuri comic, not Shuri. She has written for the Moon Girl Devil Dinosaur book. She's also writing the Photon comic book. So if you saw the Miss Marvel film, Photon or Spectrum is the Black Captain America. So she's the Captain America that I grew up with, not the Kate Danvers. Okay, so here are a bunch, and this is pulled a little bit from my website. That again is something that you all can go back and reference for more sources, more tools, more folks that you can pull in. For the sake of time, I'm not going to play the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur trailer, but this is a beautiful, I can't wait to show it with my college students, whereby you see her with her best friend and you see her with her pet dinosaur, and she cannot be the hero that she needs to be without those two entities. And you see here from the previous slide, Jordan Alfueco is the writer of one of the comic books here, and then Aletha Martinez is the illustrator, the artist that's doing the content on this particular book. Hopefully, this is really good stuff. I want to close with, because I do want to allow at least 5 minutes for any questions, feedback, comments for you all, with some topics that I think are apropos for sharing this content, introducing this content. As I said, the Moon Girl Devil Dinosaur sisterhood, family, community, camaraderie is a big underpinning of her storyline, and I think you get it again in these other popular movies, these other filmic experimentations with the Black speculative that you can talk about. I also talked about Nichelle Nichols, and you get now this conversation around interstellar space travel. Quickly, Margot Lee Shatterly, the author of Hidden Figures, the book that there's a children's version of or young adult version of, and then there's the film Hidden Figures, is the daughter of a colleague of mine, Margaret Lee, who was at Hampton in the English department when I began my career here. So I have to lift up this book, Hidden Figures. But there's also things like India Corafor's Binti, that's dealing with a girl and space travel. And there's also India Corafor has Lagoon, that's dealing with aliens that land off in the lake off of Nigeria, and the alien presents herself as a Black woman, as an ambassador for the alien species. So again, topics that one could potentially explore with their students. Then, of course, you have Michael Burnham, Star Trek Discovery, Justin Falls from The Man Who Fell to Earth, Hippolyta, and Lovecraft Country. Again, all of these women who are traveling to space or are devising the technology that enables individuals to travel the universe. Here are Black creatives. What am I suggesting to my educators? That there are units you could assign to your students where they're looking at actors, they're looking at the artists behind the scenes, or again, they're looking at some of the directors and or screenwriters of this content. So here you have Hanelle M. Culpepper, who works on the Star Trek Discovery, has directed Star Trek Discovery episodes and Star Trek Picard episodes, but she's also directed HBO's Westworld, CW Supergirl, CW Flash series, CW Gotham series, CW Originals. Jenny Lumet is the granddaughter of Lena Horne, the daughter of Sidney Lumet, and again, she is directing and executive producer on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, as well as executive producer on Star Trek Discovery. Again, that's where this character, Michael Burnham, is the first Black woman who becomes the captain of a spaceship that we meet in the franchise, and that's due to come out, Star Trek Discovery, in April of this year. It's going into its 5th season, something I would invite you all to watch if you're not familiar with it. And then you have people like Misha Green, Cheryl Dunn, Victoria Mahoney, who are working on things like Lovecraft Country and other content that, again, might be appropriate for your student age group or might be the kind of assignment that you could have them do for you. I wanted to end with Missy Elliott's Sock It To Me. We won't have time, but what I will say is I do this unit on Afrofuturism in music, whereby I actually play the videos and or I play the audio. And again, based on that definition of Afrofuturism that I gave you all on those earlier slides at the start of the talk, I ask my students to think about what they hear. What do you hear that seems to resonate with some of these themes, some of these elements that are supposed to be Afrofuturist? And one of the things that I challenge them to listen for is the kind of spacey kind of stuff, right? Or the kind of clicking, or the kinds of things that you might think you would hear, it would sound like if you were physically in a ship. And so some of these songs, do that, or some of these videos, the singers are presenting themselves in costuming that is Afrofuturist. And so the last potential topic that you guys can explore are, again, the wardrobing choices that some of these artists do. So here you have Janelle Monáe and what she wore to the 2023 Met Gala, that transformation from the first image on the left to when she disrobed into, the second image on the right. You have Doja Cat at the VMA, the Video Music Awards in 2021. You have Solange at a Guggenheim performance event in 2021. And then you have Missy Elliott at the Grammys in 2023. So that, again, depending upon your age group, there are things and lesson plans and units that you can do that give them visual text and or give them music that they can listen to and or give them story content, short stories, essays, fiction that they can read, and or you have the cartoons that you can watch, the graphic novels, comics that you can read, and or the streaming series or movies that you can show. And my last slide, I'll just kind of leave here for closing thoughts. A lot of what theorists are dancing around today is this idea of, and I'm suggesting this, and so I don't know. I'll see, I guess, how much pushback I get in the publications that I have coming out. That we are in the midst of a fourth wave of women of African descent in the who are making films, who are making who are doing the creative stories in general right now, right? Whether it's films, whether it's in the short stories, the novels, the books, and part of that ability to create this content is a result of a what Jackie Bobo in 1995 coined as black female cultural consumers, meaning you have a market for this content, right? And so out of folks who are able to can purchase the books, buy the movie tickets, pay for the streaming, who are watching this content. Obviously, the gatekeepers are more comfortable with the creation of this content, making this content available. Well, who are some of the gatekeepers? Well, that's also shifting and changing. Imani Cheers talks about as this identifying of a dominant force, right? People like Oprah Winfrey, her own network, Shonda Rhimes and her work, Ava DuVernay, and the diversity of text that she's creating. And I would suggest to that people like Misha Green, Jenny Lumet, for instance, that I zoomed through earlier in the slide. And finally, you have folks who are now talking about a gender spectatorship. What does that mean? Going back, circling 360 degrees back to the start of my talk, that we have consumers, young people who are watching this content, who are being fed, who are being informed by this content, and then you now have folks who behind the scenes or who are now rising up and able to contribute to the content that continues to push the pendulum forward in terms of the kinds of images, the kinds of storylines that are being told. So there's a reciprocity, right? I see myself in the text. I now can create more or inspire more people who are able to create the content. And ideally, folks, we get the change that I think we all want. So there I am. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your your interest. And I know we are a little over time, but if there's anything, Mike, that you think in the chat I should tackle, I'm happy to do it. Here's a way that you can contact me. By all means, I have my Black Girls Write Gmail account. I have a blackgirlswrite.com website. If that website is down, I am looking to either move it to a different provider and or place it somewhere else. By all means, if there's an interest in buying my book, I wanted to share a discount code from the publisher that I hope you all will use. And certainly, I hope that if your libraries don't have the book or your public libraries don't have the book, if maybe after my talk tonight, you'd be willing to encourage your librarians to purchase speculative film and moving images by or about Black women and girls for their collections. It's my joy. I hope that you all have really been fed. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. And just Karima, thank you. Thank you so very much. So just to give you all some context, more immediate context, Karima and I had this conversation about this webinar about a year ago. It's like a year ago, and I told her I wanted her, and without hesitation, Karima said I'll be there. And even before then, Karima, we were in Washington D.C. in a room full of African American Studies scholars at the AP African American Studies Symposium. And I spoke, and you came up to me and mentioned that you would be a fellow at the center.
Yep.
And since that time, we have actually been in contact with each other one way or another up until this event. And so I just could honestly say that you are light, and just you contribute so much. And I consider you, a friend of the program, and I know that we could always count on you. But tonight, everyone, in the weeks leading up to this, I've been saying that you all would enjoy this evening. I have so enjoyed it. Hey, Kareem, I'm just going to let you know I'm going to close out with those two videos. I'm just going to let them play. I want to, hey, because there were a few who were there who mentioned, hey, I want to check out the Moon Girl, and so I will as we close out. I'll let you all know. I'm going to have a few announcements, but then I'm going to let those videos roll, and then I have one other song. The Wonderful Remix by Teresa Griffin, which was another one of the titles that Karima recommended. So we're going to ride it on out. But thank you all so very much for being here, for just enriching this experience. I believe we had upwards around 700 people tonight. But continue to stay up on everything that's going on at the National Humanities Center, nationalhumanitiescenter.org. And again, we provide a bridge between the academic world and the working classroom. So support the humanities education programs if you so choose, if you're so inclined to give. Your gift, no matter how modest, can open up a world of ideas for teachers and rekindle their enthusiasm. As I mentioned several times before, we are a nonprofit organization. Aria, I see your message in the chat. You're so very welcome. Thank you for coming back and participating tonight. So always email if you all need anything. And so on February 20th, we have Jason Miller, another one of our former fellows, 2022, 2023. He will be here for FBI's on Langston Hughes and Martin Luther King Jr. So please join us then.